you. Good afternoon, everyone. It is indeed a pleasure and an honor to be with you today. And thank you, Todd, for being from a family of givers. I know your dad gave back in many ways in the Boys Club. It was then called the Boys Clubs in Albany, Georgia. I can remember long ago when, before there was a neighborhood town watch, or ADT security systems, or gated subdivisions. In my community, when I grew up in West Philadelphia, we had Mrs. Bentley. Mrs. Bentley was our modern-day town crier. She was the neighbor that everyone knew and trusted, and she knew everybody. Mrs. Bentley sat on her front porch all day long. And she was not just a nosy busybody. Mrs. Bentley had a great deal of pride in where she lived, and she was proud of each of us. She had an eagle eye when she would just sit watching, hovering, making mental notes of the comings and goings of people. And Mrs. Bentley looked like she could have been anyone's grandmother. And in fact, she was the matriarch of our community. When my brothers and I would pass her house on our way to school, she would stop us and ask questions and probe and wanting to know if everything was all right. And when we came home from school by her house, there she was, ever present. We knew then that she felt it was important to be connected to her community, to know what was going on, to know the good as well as the bad. As children, we would giggle at Mrs. Bentley because we didn't understand why she was on her front porch day and night, why she cared about us, or why she felt it was important to be the self-proclaimed protector of people, property, and personal belongings. Mrs. Bentley was the strong link in the chain of interconnected lives in the neighborhood. She cared, and she felt that it was her duty to be the glue that held all of us together. Unfortunately, the Mrs. Bentleys of the world are long gone. And now it is up to us to be the caring neighbors in our communities, to watch and hold vigil. So who among us is going to stand up and hold vigil in our communities? In the year 2000, the Harvard sociology professor, Robert Putnam, wrote the book, Bowling Alone, The Collapse and Revival of American Community. He showed us how more and more of us were becoming disconnected from each other and said that our whole social structure was disintegrated. He said we were disconnected from our families, from our neighbors, from our communities, and the republic itself. Was Putnam right? Is this our commentary today? The word community is derived from the Latin word communitas, cum meaning together, and munis meaning gift, or together a gift. And when we come together with the gift of community, we are embodied by a sense of connection, contributions, and cohesion. If a community is the centerpiece of a vibrant society, then what can we do to make it better and stronger than ever? In 1983, I had my first real experience as a community leader. I was the director of a very large community center that was multi-purpose. It served everyone from infants and toddlers to senior citizens. My youngest member was 4 months, and my oldest was 94. It just happened to be an affiliate of Boys and Girls Clubs of America. We opened our doors at 6 in the morning, and we closed at 10 in the evening. But it was in one of the toughest, most severely distressed communities in Philadelphia. It was so bad that it was referred to as the bottom. Even people that lived there called it the bottom. I can remember my first week on the job. One day when I was parking my car, one of the community residents came up to me and he said these words, "Miss, I'm not trying to be smart, but you aren't going to last 6 months." I was horrified because we had watched people who had applied for jobs come to the neighborhood, and instead of parking their car and coming inside, they would slow down, look around, and drive off. That was bad. I had friends and family that would come up to me and say, "Judith, you don't need to work there. You can work anywhere, teaching or counseling. You don't have to work in the bottom." But I did. And I worked there for 7 years. 7 years, until the National Office of Boys and Girls Clubs of America recruited me. And that man that once told me that I wasn't going to last 6 months, he became my staunchest supporter and the president of our neighborhood community advisory council. I learned many life lessons working at that community center, lessons that will hold dear to me for a lifetime. And I would like to share 5 of them with you today. Lesson number 1, we knew that it was important for the community center to be a safe, positive environment. It had to be a safe haven, a place where there were no drugs or weapons, no gang signs, no graffiti, no negative behavior. It had to feel like it was home away from home. It had to be warm and inviting and vibrant. It had to be a place that children could come and be accepted just as they were, rough edges and all. It needed to be clean. And it needed to be a place that had good working equipment, no junk, but most importantly, safe. Lesson number 2, it was important for the center to be a place where the children could come to have fun, a place where they did not have to worry about their drama and the tension and the stress that they were going through every day just to survive. They could leave all of that at the front door. They didn't have to carry that baggage inside with them. They could come in that center and just be children or typical teenagers. They needed a place where they felt like they could belong with a sense of usefulness, influence, and competence, where there were staff that believed in them and listened to them when perhaps no one else did. They needed a place where they could just be and have fun, with staff that recognized their needs and their interests. Lesson number 3, it was important for the staff that worked at the center to have supportive, caring relationships with children and young people that they knew believed in them. And not just for the children, but for the community at large also. We needed them to get out in the community and canvass it and let people know that they weren't afraid of them and they weren't afraid to work there. So they needed to have guts. And we needed to recognize the kinds of resources and referrals that people in need could have. So it was important for the people that worked at the center to realize that they also had a job as a safety net, a net that was available to catch people if they should tumble into an abyss of despair. Lesson number 4, it was important for our children and young people to have opportunities and high expectations. opportunities to do things and go places that they never even dreamed about, and high expectations where they could think that they could succeed. They were up against so many odds already. We knew that we could never, ever write anyone off. And lesson number 5, it was important for the children and young people to get recognition. They had to have positive reinforcement and praise for a job well done. We had to recognize their achievements, even if they were large or small. We could never skimp on praise, because the positive affirmations that we would say to a child may be the only positive words that they would hear during the course of a day. This community thrived, and it thrived because of the connections, the contributions, and the cohesion of its people. People who wanted to make a difference, people who wanted to live better, people who had a vested interest to truly live a better life. And for more than a century, Boys and Girls Clubs have helped put young people on the path to great futures by offering hope and opportunity to every child that walked through our doors. For more than a century, Boys and Girls Clubs now serve some 4 million children and young people in every state, plus Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, and on military installations in Europe and Asia. We are changing and saving lives with the work that we do every single day. Let's take a look at what can happen in the life of a child when the connections, the contributions, and the cohesion all come together to work for the greater good. I'd like for you to meet Mona Dixon, the 2011 National Youth of the Year. Here comes Mona in a video.
So you all may have known my story already of how I was a homeless girl on the streets who read my school books under a street lamp, or you know how I may have had some family struggles, or how I had adult-like responsibilities at the age of 10. And I want you to know that if somebody was to write, the same person was to write my story who walked right past me, or who didn't even look at me when I asked them for spare change because I was hungry, if they were to write a book about my life, maybe they would say that I would end up being a pregnant teenager, or that maybe I would drop out of high school, or maybe I would just end up right back on the streets with my family also. But boy, do I got some news for them. They are missing some pieces, because they didn't mention that one day I will walk into a Boys and Girls Club and that would make miracles in my life. They didn't mention that one day I would become the National Youth of the Year for Boys and Girls Clubs of America. And they didn't... They didn't mention that I would meet my favorite basketball player, LeBron James, or how I would be able to sit and chit-chat with Ashanti. And they also didn't mention that I would be a part of a PSA with over 20 extraordinary celebrities who were all there for just one cause, and that's their Boys and Girls Club. And of course they didn't mention that I would be able to sit in an MLB All-Star game and eat up everything on the menu with Roxanne Spillett, who I will always hold dear to my heart. And they didn't mention that Rick and Susan Goings would pay for me to go to college only because they believe in me. And they didn't mention that I would be on the dean's list in my honors college for freshman year. And lastly, I want to say I read a book. It's called A Hand to Guide Me by Denzel Washington, and which you should get, by the way. And he says that everybody needs a helping hand from time to time, a gentle nudge to get them on track. And you never know when the helping hand that you provide will lead someone on the path to greatness. And I want all of you guys to take that today, because when you give to this organization, you're not giving out handouts. You're investing in our futures. You are giving us a second chance at life. I want to thank God and thank you. Thank you.
As we marvel at the Mona Dixons of the world, it reminds us of the importance of community, to have the connections, the contributions, and the cohesion that all come together to make a profound difference. Now more than ever, the old African proverb, "It takes a village to raise a child," is more meaningful and has added significance. And it takes more than just one organization to perform these miracles that Mona just talked about. What is our collective responsibility? When we take a look at the snapshot of the dreadful state of America's children and young people today, we should be horrified. And it makes us realize that we have to have a sense of urgency about community. Let's take a look at some of these statistics. There are a record number of Americans living in poverty today, 46 million people. And children are the poorest people in America, with nearly 8 million of them living in high-rated poverty areas. Among the country's 50 largest cities, Atlanta ranks 5th for the number of children living in poverty. That's 43% of all children right here in Atlanta. And nationally, every 26 seconds, another teen drops out of high school. We lose about 7,000 students every single day. The United States is the only industrialized nation where young people are less likely than their parents to graduate with a high school diploma. Millions of children get to the 4th grade, but they cannot read proficiently, and this puts them on the dropout track. Of the 34 industrialized countries, the United States ranks 17th in reading, 23rd in science, and 31st in math. And China ranks number 1 in each of these subject areas. In 2012 alone, this year, 1.2 million children are not expected to graduate from high school. And right here in the state of Georgia, only 58.8% will graduate. So where is the outrage? Why aren't we screaming at the top of our lungs? Why aren't the alarm bells going off all over this nation so that the sound is deafening? What are the connections, contributions, and cohesion that we need to strengthen our community? I'm wrapping up, but I just want you to know that a few weeks ago, I read a wonderful article in the USA Today, and it was about communities that wanted to make a difference, communities that wanted to do things. And I just want to show you what one community did that's spreading all over the country. They are developing what's called little free libraries, places that look like converted birdhouses or retrofitted mailboxes that are filled with books. And the notion is to get people to enjoy reading, to have a thirst for knowledge. And some of these mailboxes are in the front lawns. They are in 24 states and in 8 countries. Why couldn't they be in all 50 states? I challenge you, TEDxAtlanta, if you want to make the connections with your neighbors, why don't all of us contribute books and have that sense of cohesion where we can have a little free library in our neighborhood? There is no tech, so you don't need an iPad or a Kindle Fire. It's free. You don't need any library card All you need to do is to donate a book. I believe that we have not lost our sense of community. I believe that all of us in this room has the capacity to mentor a child, to mold and shape an impressionable young life. And I believe that all of us can reach back and give back to make a difference in the communities where we live. Let's remember one more African proverb, and it goes something like this. A tree cannot stand without its roots. Why? Because we are the community. Thank you very much.